What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing the Hammersmith ghost, and I'm still on a little bit of a hiatus from the channel, but I missed you guys and I didn't want to leave you hanging with nothing for the next week or two. I am setting up the new channel, as most of you know, the Moon Bear Oracle, where I'm going to do once a month and once a week, Lord willing, readings for each sign of the zodiac and give courses on how to read Oracle intuitively and just all kinds of things, talking about astrology and Oracle and divination. And I'm really excited about it. I'm also kind of working on making the jewelry for the jewelry line. I had a little bit of an issue with the bracelets this morning, but it's all going to come together because I only manifest the best for myself, right? Right, guys? That's what y'all keep telling me, and I'm trying to keep that in my head. So I thought this was kind of a cute little story. And don't mind my hair, I just showered, so sorry. I thought this was a cute little story that I can kind of just put in for you guys to have something and hang out with me for a little bit while I start the February readings for the other channel. So this is the Hammersmith ghost. The Hammersmith ghost murder case of 1804 actually set a major legal precedent in the United Kingdom regarding self-defense laws. It made it so that someone could be held accountable for trying to defend themselves, even if they were the consequence of a mistaken belief. Sounds confusing, right? Don't worry, it gets even more unbelievable as we go along. It's up to you to decide if this case was mass hysteria, an actual haunting, or flat out murder. I thought this would be kind of a fun one, guys, even though if you're one of us who believes there was actually an apparition lurking about, it could be more terrifying than anything else if you really think about what was going on here. Or at least what people thought was going on here for a really long time. Like I said, I'm still working on my other projects, but I can't leave you guys for this long. The videos for the next week or two are going to be kind of sporadic on this channel, but you'll always have the weekly 3-card until I move it to the other channel. And then I'll be back to, hopefully, my 2-video-a-week schedule. And I'll keep you posted with updates as I do. But for now, here it is, everyone, the Hammersmith ghost story. This was the early 19th century, 1804 to be exact, and West London's Hammersmith district was overrun with rumors that in one of the local graveyards lurked a terrifying apparition with a glass eye and horns shrouded in white. Keep in mind that this area was not the bustling city we know it to be today. Back then, it was a small village which wasn't greatly lit and was extremely isolated at nighttime when it was dark. Obvi. The locals thought the apparition was the ghost of a man who took his own life and was buried in the cemetery just a year before. Of course, nobody who saw the legendary apparition had ventured close enough to see for themselves who or what it really was, and as they usually are, an urban legend of sorts was kind of born. This evil-looking apparition was actually said to be quite menacing as well, having been said to jump out of the barely lit corners to attack people unlucky enough to be passing by at that very moment. A spirit or ghost attacking the living is something that is very possible, as we know nowadays as well, and also really, really terrifying. It was even reported in the local news that the pregnant wife of a locksmith saw the apparition face to face and immediately died of fear and shock. Others were known to have had encounters with the Hammersmith ghost and were left seriously ill from the shock of it all. There wasn't even safety in numbers, as this demonic-looking menace is said to have attacked a wagon carrying 16 passengers who all attested to having encountered it that night. In the taverns of the day, talk of this alleged ghost and its constant attacks on the people of the town was rampant. By the 3rd of January 1804, some regulars at a tavern called the White Hart Inn got to discussing the rumors and sharing stories they had heard and what they had known about all of the attacks and the fear it was bringing down on the small community. The community was basically in turmoil because of what was going on with this apparition. Among the men was a local off-duty customs officer named Francis Smith. And Francis Smith decided it would be a good idea to lead a posse of the men he was drinking with into the cemetery to take care of this entity once and for all. He loudly proclaimed that he would be the one to put an end to this ghost run of terror, and he was going to do it that very night. He thought himself a vigilante and apparently a tough guy as well. He went back to his house and grabbed his fowling piece, which is a fancy name for some kind of gun, and no clue what kind of gun it actually was, guys, sorry. He made his way around the village on an unauthorized patrol and ended up allegedly following the apparition onto Black Lion Lane, into which it is said to have disappeared into thin air. It wasn't until 11 p.m. that Francis Smith saw what he believed was the elusive Hammersmith ghost. A figure in white appeared right there in the lane. Smith immediately drew his weapon and demanded to know the name of the so-called entity and told it to stop right where it was and show itself. Unfortunately, the figure moved toward him and he shot it. He believed it was the ghost, and he also believed it was coming right at him. Smith went over to the fallen apparition and saw, to his horror, that he had actually shot a local bricklayer who was known to wear a white apron due to his occupation, named James Millwood. Millwood was only 23 years old. According to witnesses, the shot had gone through Millwood's jaw. Francis Smith was inconsolable at the realization he had just committed murder on an innocent man. Unlike a few hours earlier, when he was boasting and being a loudmouth tough guy in the pub, he was incoherent and babbling like an idiot, unable to explain what it was he had done. I think he was possibly in shock. James Millwood's body was taken back to the very same tavern from which Smith had set out earlier in the night, and Francis Smith was placed under arrest. On January 5th, an investigation was started as to what had actually taken place that night, and it started with investigators questioning people at the Black Lion Inn. This was not unusual for the time to be conducting a full-fledged investigation of a murder from a tavern, pub, or bar. This was a bit confusing for me as I read on, so it seems a bit like a grand jury was held is kind of the only way that I can explain it. So what we in America consider a grand jury, they were doing this in the pub that night. At first, I thought they were just asking witnesses to come forward and talking to people, but apparently after this inquest, Francis Smith was formally charged with the willful murder of James Millwood. 10 days later, on what just happened to be Friday the 13th, because of course it was, the court had 3 judges presiding whose names were Lord Chief Baron MacDonald and Judges Rook and Lawrence. There isn't any known documentation that survived in full for all of this time, but the most incredible evidence has survived throughout the years. Here's where this case, in my opinion, gets even more unbelievable than what we've already heard. It's actually unofficially known as the most incredible evidence ever received by a court sitting at the Old Bailey. So many people came forward and testified that there was an actual ghost haunting the cemetery in defense of Francis Smith. They wanted to get the point across that he wasn't just making up this crazy story about being on a ghost hunt as an excuse for why he was armed and on patrol in and around the cemetery that night. This was also to prove that he was in fact looking for a ghost and not out acting recklessly, just looking for someone or something to shoot. He was acting recklessly, but he wasn't just waiting for the first person or animal to pop by. He was specifically looking for this ghost, and people were really backing him up on this point. This was pretty incredible testimony, even for this time, as you can probably imagine. A man named Thomas Groom testified that just before the Christmas holiday, he had been seized by the Hammersmith ghost. A night watchman named William Girdle also testified, saying he had seen the ghastly apparition himself while on patrol on the 19th of December. William also testified to the condition of the alleged murderer right after the shooting had taken place. He said that when he had arrived at the scene of the shooting to find Millwood lying dead and Smith agitated and scared. Even James Millwood, so the victim's sister, testified that she believed the Hammersmith ghost to exist and that it was, quote, all in white with horns and glass eyes, end quote. His mother-in-law, James Millwood's, the victim's, also testified and said that the previous Saturday, James had been mistaken for the ghost again, or beforehand. So a week before he was shot and killed, being mistaken for this ghost, he was mistaken for the ghost at that time too. There's no detail I could find as to who mistook him or what came of it or how it happened, but that's saying something. People were in a panic. It was mass hysteria, in my opinion. Francis Smith did not testify in his own defense, as only around the end did he, through some legal rules and things being changed during the trial, was he lawfully considered to be competent enough to do so, but he didn't. An unsworn statement was given to the court, though, and it claimed, quote, on the day on which the fatal catastrophe happened and at the very moment of the affair taking place, he did not know what he was doing. He spoke to the person twice and was most agitated on receiving no answer, that in his confusion and dread he was unfortunate enough to commit the rash action, but he solemnly declared to God that he had no malice against the deceased, nor any intention of taking the life of any individual whatever, end quote. The jury came back with a manslaughter verdict. They believed that Smith truly believed he was firing upon an actual ghost and not a human being. They believed that he did not act with malice or intent and therefore was not guilty of the charge of willful murder. MacDonald, however, Lord Chief Baron MacDonald, who I think was like the head judge, disapproved vehemently of this verdict, as he was more concerned with the fact that it was an act of vigilantism, and he thought it would set a very dangerous precedent in the town, that people can just go out looking for ghosts and end up committing a murder, which I can kind of see his side too. Let me know what you think in the comments. I have to agree with that a little bit, as look how things were done back in those days. You really could just kind of get a posse together and go out and kill somebody. MacDonald stated, quote, "The killing of a person through apprehension for one's safety or by mere accident may indeed be styled only manslaughter, but unfortunately such circumstances cannot be found in this case. If the law were otherwise, and if a man could say he thinks another deserves death for having committed such and such an act, and therefore goes on to the highway and executes judgment with his own hands by shooting robbers and others, whom he may deem troublesome, dreadful would be the consequences. It is fortunate that the law of his country has made such an offense to be murder," end quote. So he was not going to accept the manslaughter verdict because of pretty much what I just said. People can just go around killing whoever they want or whoever they deem to be unsavory or say that they thought it was a ghost or an apparition, right? And I understand that, but I don't agree with going against the jury either, but keeping it basic. So basically, he told the jury to convict Francis Smith of murder, which they were somehow able to do, even though they had already decided the verdict was manslaughter. Smith was sentenced to death, but the judges never intended to actually put him to hang. MacDonald decided this case was bizarre enough it should be sent to the king himself to ask, I guess, for his opinion on the matter. MacDonald also said at the end of the trial, quote, "His lordship was so speedy in his humane office that a respite during pleasure arrived at the Old Bailey before 7 o'clock, end quote. So basically he said that somehow during the trial the king had been made aware and had already rendered his own judgment, which would trump any judge or jury, and that Smith would be sentenced to hard labor and not executed. Essentially, he had been immediately pardoned. This sounds sort of far-fetched to me, but who knows? Suddenly, there were no more sightings of this alleged ghost, and it seemed as though the trial of Francis Smith had somehow exorcised the demon out of the cemetery and sent it directly back to hell where it came from. However, this was until a shoemaker, whose name was only said to be Graham, confessed to being the one that everyone was seeing, as he admitted to dressing up this way and, quote, making a nuisance of himself, end quote. He wasn't brought up on any charges, though, despite the rumors of the pregnant woman dying from fright merely by laying eyes on him dressed as the apparition, and also the other almost fatal accidents that happened directly because of his idiocy. About 30 years later, directly across the River Thames, and I think I pronounced that wrong, I'm sorry, from the small village of Hammersmith came the first sightings of the alleged devilish apparition, which came to be known as Spring-Heeled Jack. More on that later. And I got to tell you guys, before I ever started my YouTube channel, Spring-Heeled Jack was the first case I ever wanted to cover. So I am going to bring that to you guys soon. This case caused a long-standing issue in the English courts for a very long time afterward. To what extent a person who mistakenly uses force as a result of an honest but unreasonable belief should be held liable for their actions. It said a mistake can only be a reasonable, mitigating, or excusable factor if it was a reasonable one, but reasonable in whose opinion? It turned out not to be the person who committed the so-called honest act. So it didn't matter if you thought your actions were reasonable, which is kind of how it is in America today too. It's a little bit strange to me though, because in the very wording is the acceptance that the person really did make a mistake and honestly thought they were acting in self-defense. But they're saying it doesn't matter what you thought while you were committing it, which is kind of contradictory. I don't know. Crickets. However, the law states that it's up to the jury and judges to decide whether or not the action was reasonably committed. There apparently needed to be an, quote, objective point of view, end quote, on the matter. There's more legality to this that lasted for years. Apparently, some guy thought he was shooting a Wendigo and shot his sister-in-law and was only convicted of manslaughter. And there was more attention given to the person's mental state before and during the time of the act. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please be sure and give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, if you enjoyed hanging out with me. Like I said, it was just a short one, so I get to hang out with you all as I move on to other ventures. But don't worry, like I said, I'm still going to get back to 2 videos a week as quickly as I can. I'm always going to put the 3 card till I start the other channel. So stay here, you guys. You know, if you miss me, I will be back. If you want to hang out with me, check me out live on Wednesday nights right here on the Gemma Jade channel, where I pull 1 oracle card and give you a weekly reading. First come, first serve. I usually get through like 25 to 35 readings, but I'm ousting the affirmation cards to make it move a lot smoother, more efficiently, and quicker. And I start at 7:15 p.m. Eastern time and go through to about 10:45, 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. First come, first serve. Even if you don't want to get a card read, come in and hang out. I am so proud of the beautiful community that has kind of sprouted up around me. You can also hang out with me every single night of the weekend, because on Friday nights I am on Paranormal Chop Shop, which starts at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and I stay until 10 or 11, as late as I can, depending on what I'm doing, but I'm always there for at least an hour, and those guys are so awesome. You guys should just subscribe over there anyway. And Saturday and Sunday nights, of course, I'm on the After Hour Show with Big Wooly Townsend and John Hudson on Spaced Out Radio. I am on there from 11 p.m. Eastern time to 2 a.m. Eastern time, but right before I come on, it's the beautiful Queen of the Night, Lynn Wallington. You might want to watch her, have her kind of bring you in. She likes to have a drink and chit chat with you all, and she has amazing topics as well. Check out SOR throughout the entire week too, and don't forget, I write most of the scripts. I'm head writer, I should say, for Missing Persons and Mysteries. Most of you know Steve Stockton, the creator of the channel, Bill Melder. Go on over there and check those out too. So sister channels, I guess, brother channels, Spaced Out Radio, Paranormal Chop Shop, and Missing Persons and Mysteries, and who knows what else, to infinity and beyond. I can't wait to launch Moon Bear Oracle. I can't wait to launch the jewelry line on Etsy and on YouTube, and I'm just really excited about the future. Thank you guys so much for supporting me, inspiring me. Okay, the link to buy my book, Missing the Faith Theory, will be in the description box. You can also find in the description box a link to at least one of all the live streams I do throughout the week. So my Wednesday night Oracle, Saturday's After Hour Show, Sunday's After Hour Show, and Friday's Paranormal Chop Shop Show, just so like if you can't catch it live, you can get an idea of how much fun it is and how amazing, like the amazing time that we have. A lot of you come in, and a lot of you can probably attest to that. Also, if you want to support me and all that I do, buying new decks, buying new backgrounds, getting the stuff together for my jewelry, or if you just want to support me in general and support the channel, you will find PayPal, Cash App, Patreon, and Amazon wish list links all in the description box below. I love you guys so very much, and I appreciate all of you. You have no idea how much the support means to me. It's absolutely immense. You guys are so amazing. All right, make sure you gave that video a big thumbs up. Spread the love by sharing. Go and subscribe to my brother channels, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, stay awesome, stay sexy, stay spooky, stay intrigued, stay searching for answers. Be kind to each other, be kind to yourselves. Have your best day, have your best night, and I will see you next time, now that I rambled for a whole 7 minutes.